Guru Nation, happy 2019. Happy New Year. Welcome to episode 226 of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I've been MIA, first because of the holidays, like I usually do. I take about 2 weeks off around Christmas and New Year, so I don't usually post content. But then I got back January 2nd, back to work. But unfortunately, and you could probably still hear a little bit of it, I sound a lot better now than I did last week. I couldn't talk. I just could not talk. It was painful, and you could only hear every other word. So I thought better than to do a podcast last week, but saved them all for this week. So going to do a couple this week, one by myself, one with Chris. Today's podcast is going to be also our January 2019 webinar. So it ties in nicely with the new year and New Year's resolutions. And I actually hate New Year's resolutions. I really do. But I think everyone, whether you like them or not, everyone has goals for the new year. And this is the time of the year that everybody wants to accomplish certain things for the upcoming year. So for 2019, I know I have my goals. I'm sure you have yours. So we did a podcast to wrap up 2018 on how to accomplish your 2019 goals. This one's more specific. So this is not really about goals. This is an actionable piece of content. So how to improve or build your skill set, whether you're an employee, or how to offer and essentially improve your business, right? Like your offerings as a site, as a consultant, as a CRO, whatever it is that you're doing in this industry as a vendor, how to improve and add more skill sets. Basically the company equivalent of how to grow your skill set this year. So we're going to break that down. We're going to go through how to do that, whether you are an employee in the industry, for example, a clinical research coordinator that wants to be a CRA, or whether you're a site that wants to diversify into other types of studies, wants to be able to offer different types of business offerings. We're going to get into that too. So how to build your skill set. And I'm writing this down as we go along. I'm also watching the national championship game right now, college football, between Alabama and Clemson. I don't really care about either, but this is a good game, so I'll be watching this as we do the podcast. So, how to improve your skill set for 2019, or how to do more. Let's just call it how to do more, whether you're an employee or a business. How to do more. If you do not want to do more this year, if you do not want to improve in any area, if you do not want to learn new skills in this industry as it pertains to clinical research, you don't need to listen. You don't need to watch. Join us for the next episode. But most people are going to want to improve, do more, build. It's just natural for everyone to want to do this around this time of the year. So the first thing, the theme is get out of your comfort zone. Okay? Don't box yourself in to any category. So let's break it down. If you're a clinical research coordinator, your job description is going to be, and this is probably not a good example to start with because the job description for coordinators ranges, like there's a wide range of the job description for a study coordinator. Like at a private clinic, at a private site, coordinators usually do a lot more than at a university where everything's more streamlined. Same thing with a smaller site versus at a larger site. At a small site, You're probably going to be wearing more hats as a coordinator at a large site. Probably not. But no matter which situation you're in, you have a job description, right? And you get into a routine, and it's human nature to want to figure out how to do your job well with the least amount of effort. There's nothing wrong. It's human nature. I do this as an entrepreneur. I try to figure this out for my companies. What is the minimal amount of effort I need to put in to achieve results where either I don't look bad, or I can sustain, or as far as revenue is concerned, I can maintain the same level of activity to bring in revenue. So you figure out how to do your job or how to run your business, and that's it. Then you're done, and then you can relax. Unless you want to grow, then you figure out how to do more, and then once you figure out how to do more, you relax, and then that's it, right? And then the cycle just repeats. Or you don't want to learn how to do more, and you just keep it that way forever until you decide you need a new job, you want a new business, and then you do this again, and then the cycle repeats again. First of all, there's nothing wrong with doing this. It's human nature. However, it's not conducive to growing as an entrepreneur or as an employee at all. But I'm not knocking anyone who does it. Like I said, I've done it before. I'm often guilty of doing this, even today. What I have done is I've forced myself to never be comfortable by taking on more projects. So I try to build systems for my businesses, and they may be less dependent on me because I have staff. But now my role changes to where I used to be the one doing everything and working in the business. Then I hire staff and I build systems. And now I'm working on the business, right? What does that mean? That means mentoring people, mentoring my employees. That means having some kind of oversight over my employees. Eventually, I want to even outsource this part of managing my employees. I don't like managing. I want to hire someone to manage my employees for each business, right? And we're going to get to that point. I've been in that point in other businesses. I'm in that point now with some businesses, not with others. In some of my businesses, I'm in the doer, in the active working in the business phase, like my CRO, like my consulting company. So that's my strategy for always growing and always improving, is just taking on new projects or trying to grow each company larger than it was before, until it gets to a certain point where I don't want to grow it anymore. Like, I'm at this point with some of my sites. I actually don't want to grow those sites anymore. And that's because I have other businesses I want to run. So I don't need to grow those sites. It's actually more profitable in certain cases where you're keeping a certain size of a clinic as opposed to a bigger one. And it's more enjoyable. I guess that's what it boils down to, is what do you want? Okay. Now, if you're an employee, I'm not knocking you for doing this. I'm especially not knocking you for using this strategy of figuring out the bare minimum work you need to where you still look good doing your job, so you're still eligible to get raises and the boss still likes you. I'm not knocking it. Like, that's good. I'm glad you can figure that out because you've got a life outside of work. You want to maintain that. But if you want to grow and expand your skill set, you're going to have to do more than what's required of you from your job description. So once you get to the point of learning your job description, or in the case of entrepreneurs, learning your business, and then once you've figured it out, once it gets boring, if it's boring, it means you figured out how to do your job effectively with minimal effort. That's great for your life. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's not great if you're trying to grow your skill set, or in the case of a business, grow your offerings, your service offerings. So what do you do in this case? Well, if you want to do more, if you want to grow, you need to forget about your job description. Like, obviously, you know how to do that, right? How do you think outside the box? Get outside of your comfort zone. Do more than what's asked of you without even asking for permission. Chances are, if you're doing your job and you're doing it well, you don't need to ask permission from a boss for a lot of things. What I'm about to tell you is going above and beyond what you're asked to do. For example, and there's thousands of possible combinations of what you can add. Only you know which area you want to grow, right? Let's take the study coordinator as an example again. There's several different roadmaps for coordinators. A common one is they go on to be CRAs. A less common one, but increasingly more so, is opening sites. Those are two very different, those two roadmaps require a very different skill set from one another. So you got to know where you want to go first, and then you want to add the skills while you're in your current job. So let's take the example of a coordinator that wants to be a site owner. You may not be required to recruit subjects at your site. You may not be required to do community outreach. You may not be required to post ads on Craigslist and figure out how to run Facebook ads to get more patients to the clinic, or pre-screen patients. Maybe that's not part of your job description. Well, you know what? As a site owner, that's a very important part. That's one of the 3 pillars of owning a site, is patients, physicians, studies. Those 3 things. That's the foundation for being a good site owner, mastering those 3 things. So as a coordinator, even if it's not in your job description, it's still, number one, going to benefit the company for you to figure out how to recruit patients better. No one's going to stop you from doing that. Number 2, it's going to benefit you long term for your ambitions. And that's just patients. Like I said, there's 3 pillars if you want to open a site. Physicians. It's not in your job description to get new physicians to join your clinic. But if you want to open a site one day, why not start now? Why not practice while you're getting paid? The site owner is not going to tell you not to, right? And if they do, something's wrong with them. Or if they have a problem, it's probably because it's coming at the expense of you doing what you're hired to do. So again, this gets back to what I'm saying. Do more. Like, you've already figured out how to do your job well enough to not get fired, or maybe even do your job well enough to continuously get the approval of your employer. Well, now you just need to add more to that. Go out and start recruiting physicians. Learn how to do that after you're doing your job. Your job description still comes first, all right? This is more. You're adding more to what you're about to do. Same thing with getting studies. I don't know one site owner in the world who's going to prevent his or her coordinator from trying to get more studies for the site, right? Why are you going to do that? Why are you going to do this for free? Because you just said you want to open a site one day. So why not figure out how to do this now and get a better idea of whether it is that you really do want to open a site? Because chances are those 3 things you can do without your employer getting upset. Matter of fact, they're probably going to be happy. When it comes down to budgets and things like that, the employer may not want you to go through contracts and budgets. It's understandable. So you may not get the full experience of what it is to run a site, but you're getting much more than you are if you're just sticking to your job description, right? So that's the roadmap for a coordinator that wants to open a site. Now, what's the roadmap for a coordinator that wants to be a CRA? Very different. Very different. Okay. You don't care about recruiting patients because CRAs don't do that. You don't care about recruiting physicians because CRAs don't do that. You're not sales at all. All right. As a site owner, it's mostly sales. As a CRA, it's mostly operations. So do more of the operations. And what kind of operations? Source data verification, source data review. What's the difference between SDV and SDR? SDV is making sure what's on the source is also what's in the EDC. Now, if you're a coordinator on your study, you can SDV your own study, but you should be doing that as you go along anyways. But you can SDV on another coordinator study where they're the primary coordinator, and maybe you're just a backup on that study, and maybe you're never required to do anything unless that other coordinator is sick or is on vacation. That's when you step in. That's part of your job description. Well, what do you do the rest of the time when they are there? You probably don't do anything with that study. Well, why not do source data verification? Have an extra set of eyeballs on that person's study. And then source data review, SDR. Much more complicated than source data verification. Source data review is making sure that the way the study is being run and the way the information has been entered and captured is actually compliant with the protocol and with good clinical practice. That takes more of an in-depth understanding of the protocol in that case. So yes, it's way more work than what you've been doing. But if you want to be a CRA, you're not going to just be a CRA by sticking to your regular job description. Unless your job description already includes all of these things in it. And then there's other things that CRAs do that you don't do as a coordinator, like writing reports. And maybe you can write a report each time you do SDV or SDR on your colleague's study. And you're not going to include those in the in the study files for that study, but maybe your site can develop a QA system. Even better, maybe you can spearhead this initiative and have a system in place for quality assurance and quality control where everyone is being cross-trained on the other studies that they're not necessarily responsible for, and everyone is figuring out how to do SDV and SDR on other people's studies, because it never hurts to have an extra set of eyes on a protocol. Coordinators are busy, they make mistakes, they rush, right? So maybe you can spearhead this. And now what have you done? Now you've gone well beyond your job description. You're now developing a system. You're developing an SOP for quality control, quality assurance, source data verification, source data review. Document, get good at writing. Another thing the CRAs have to do is mostly writing reports. I'm a CRA, I'm a part-time CRA. These trip reports involve a lot of writing. If you're not good at writing, get better at writing. Maybe write more detailed progress notes as a study coordinator, right? More detail. Maybe write more note to files. Just improve your skills by doing more than what's required of you. And those are just two roadmaps for coordinators. But, I mean, you can just use your imagination at this point. I'm just giving you a platform to build upon, right? It's more of why you should do something and why we're laying out this system for you to get out of your comfort zone and to think outside the box for your job description. And no one's going to ask you to do this. This is the craziest part of this whole concept, is nobody's going to ask you to do this, right? Maybe your employer will get upset. But again, if they do, I think it's because they think it's going to come at the expense of you not doing your job description properly. Or they're afraid that you're going to get better and then they'll lose you, right? But you got to navigate these things carefully. I mean, you know your employer better than I do. Figure out how to do this, how to improve your skill set, how to do more without ruffling any feathers, and then keep pushing. Keep pushing until you figure out what the limit is, right? And then stop and go back a little bit. If you cross the limit, go back. All right. Same thing with site owners or CRO owners or CRAs. Let's go with CRAs that want to be site owners. Those 3 pillars I told that coordinator, same exact thing you've got to figure out. How are you going to get patients? How are you going to get studies? And how are you going to get physicians, right? Start when you go on monitoring visits. Start picking the brain of the people at the site. Figure out who's responsible for getting studies. How do they go about doing that, right? I have videos on how to do this, but maybe you want to hear it from someone else. How do you get studies? How did you get physicians? How do you network? How do you get patients? The patient thing is actually something that most CRAs can find out because it's part of the recruitment section on your monitoring trip reports. But the getting studies and getting physicians, and if you're a CRA, it's going to be weird if you ask your employer for you to help sites recruit more patients. I'm not recommending that because I know these CROs definitely don't think outside the box. Sites barely do, but they do. But CROs are sponsors. Like if you're a CRA and you propose to your line manager, hey, let me help my site find studies better, like that's really not part of your job description, and that provides no value add to your current employer. As opposed to the coordinator example I gave earlier, where going outside of your job description does provide value to the employer, right? So for you as a CRA, you've still got to go beyond your job description, but it's not going to be outside of recruitment maybe. It's not going to be much value add to your employer. So what you've got to do is you've got to go out and network with people, pick brains. How do I find physicians? How do I find studies for my site, right? What are some of the problems? What are some of the challenges that these site owners have in their sites? These are going to come from networking, right? And also go out to conferences. Go to Magi, go to Site Solutions Summit, come to my conference in October 2019, Clinicon. Network with people. Go out and network, right? Another thing CRAs don't do is they don't really have patient interaction. So again, it's going to come down to networking because in your case as a CRA, you do want to grow your skill set if you want to be a site owner, but there really is no value add for your employer in that case. So it's even trickier because to build your skill set, you've got to do it in a more indirect, roundabout way. But the good thing you have going for you is nobody has to hire you for you to open your own site. Unlike the coordinators who want to be CRAs, they need these tangible skills added to their CV so that they can talk to a job recruiter about what they've done extra at their site as a coordinator, how they've gone beyond their job description, right? Like they need that tangibly demonstrated on their CV. You as a CRA that wants to open a site, luckily for you, you don't need that. There's no job recruiter that's going to say, hey, you're going to be a great site owner. You've got to keep it all up here in your head. Okay, so that's what you have. That's the pros and cons for you as a CRA, but it's still expanding your knowledge, expanding your skills. It's just a different way of doing it, right? So, and I'm sure there's other ways. I really haven't thought about this particular example. Let's take the business owners now. If you're a site and you want to do different kinds of studies, it starts here, starts upstairs in the head. Figure out what you want to do, and then figure out what it's going to take. If all you've been doing is psychiatry studies, like me for my first 5-7 years in the industry, and you want to diversify into general medicine studies, what do you need for that? Well, 3 things, the 3 pillars. You're going to need the studies. How are you going to get the studies? Well, you need a doctor who's qualified to do those studies. Yeah, your psychiatrist might get some general medicine studies, but the questions are going to inevitably come up from the sponsors. Why would a psychiatrist want to do an asthma study, right? You can get away with it for a while, but eventually you're going to come across a sponsor who's not going to want to select your psychiatrist for their general medicine studies for whatever reason. And it's not necessarily bad reasoning on their part either. I would ask the same thing. How is a psychiatrist going to recruit patients for asthma? So there's no way around it. You've got to get outside your comfort zone too. Go find a doctor, a general medicine, family practice physician, or vice versa. Maybe you have a family practice physician, but you want to specialize up. Yes, you can get specialty studies for your general medicine family practice doctor, but just like what I just mentioned, eventually you're going to get some pushback from the sponsors. Why would a family practice physician do a psychiatry study, right? And eventually you're going to get to the point where they're not going to select you because they want a psychiatrist or a specialist. So you've got to go out and get those specialists and increase your service offerings as a site. Then you've got to figure out, so once you've got the physician, you've got to figure out how to get the studies for that physician. Luckily for you, it's the same process. But yes, you got to learn a little bit of a new vocabulary because every medical condition, every indication has different assessments. Asthma assessments are not the same as schizophrenia assessments, are definitely not the same as oncology assessments. You're going to have to learn a new language. And yes, your physicians are going to know this, but you still have to know what you're talking about as the site owner. You obviously don't have to know as much as a doctor. No one's expecting you to, but you've got to expand your knowledge, expand your skill set, get out of your comfort zone. Now that's if your site wants to grow into other areas of as far as study offerings, studies that you can do. Now, what if you want to expand your site from like an outpatient clinic to an inpatient clinic? Completely different skill set. You've got to that becomes more of a real estate game at first, right? What facility do you need? What permits do you need? What approvals do you need for overnight stays? Your city, your county, your state. What has to change with your CLIA certificate? What kind of a lab setup are you going to do? You've got to completely change your SOPs. That's for sure. If all you've been doing is outpatient studies and now you want to start doing inpatient studies as well, you've got to have SOPs now for the inpatient studies. How do you go about doing that? Well, network, right? Go to conferences. You can even try to go find a place that doesn't know who you are, a competitor, and go work there, right? Hopefully they don't know who you are and they'll figure out who you are. That's been done to me. I have not done that to someone else, but I would. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But then again, someone's moral compass might be different. But figure out ways to do this, right? Figure out ways to expand your skill set, and it's going to come at the expense of getting out of your comfort zone. Here's a perfect example of what I did recently. So with my CRO, we landed our first CRO project ever last year, 2018, and it happened to be in oncology. And I have zero experience in oncology. Or I should say I had zero experience in oncology. So what did I do? I took on a contract CRA position for oncology. Right? And I've been learning a lot about oncology through my contract position. Right? I've also networked with CRAs that do oncology or have done oncology. I've also audited sites. Remember, I'm a contractor now. So I've called sites that do oncology and said, hey, I would like to come in and do a QA visit for free. I'm not even going to charge. Just going to come in, do a QA visit. I did that once. It actually led to a paid contracting position for that site. And guess what? Within a year, I learned oncology. And that is an ethical way. That's a more ethical way than the previous example I mentioned to do. And it works. It expands your skill set. And guess what? Now with my CRO, I understand oncology way better, infinitely better than I did when I first started out, which was zero, right? From zero to anything is infinity. So I expanded my skill set by getting out of my comfort zone. I don't necessarily like monitoring. I don't like doing QA visits at sites in indications that I have zero experience in, but I had to do it. I needed to do it. So I went out and did it. And then I eventually translated into a contract CRA position, which I still have, by the way. I still have. And I actually do enjoy it now because I don't go that often. I have one monitoring visit every 2 months. So it's, to me, that's very sustainable, very doable. But now I have a bunch of oncology experience. Well, at least a bunch compared to what I had before I did all this. So now what if you are a site and you want to be a CRO? Well, there's many ways to go about doing this. The theme again, think outside the box. Get outside your comfort zone. If you want to be a CRO and you have a PI that is respected in the industry, like solid PIs, done studies, has a lot of experience with clinical research, there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 7 pharma that like him, whether they're big pharma, biotechs, doesn't matter, or her. Get them to do an investigator-initiated trial. Maybe Pfizer loves your PI. Maybe you've done 7 studies in the last 5 years for Pfizer, and you've exceeded expectations on all of them. Well, guess what? Pfizer wants to keep your PI happy. They love him or her. They'll do whatever they can to keep them around, keep them in their network. Investigator-initiated trials go on all the time, right? This is where you partner with a pharma company. You get a grant from them. You write a protocol. Hey, you said you wanted to be a CRO. I know it sounds like a lot of work. This is what it's going to take. And by the way, this is just one avenue. There's other pathways to go about doing this. IITs are tough, but so is owning a CRO, right? So figure out how to do investigator-initiated trials. Sponsors don't want to work with you? Here's another pathway. Get a NIH grant and do it yourself. Screw the sponsor, right? Do it yourself. That's another pathway. Yes, it's hard. Yes, your PI needs to be on board and want to do this. You've got to convince them, right? If you really want to be a CRO, maybe give them equity in your CRO and say, hey, in order to be a CRO, this is the next step to becoming a CRO, is getting these investigator-initiated trials, whether we get the funding from the sponsor directly or the funding through the NIH or the funding through some other way you can get the funding. Do the study. Or maybe reach out to biotechs that haven't done studies and don't have the budget to afford an IQVIA or a Syneos. There's a market for these people, right? They know they want to do a study. They have to do a study. And there's certain things that they don't understand how to do, but you do. But they don't know who you are because you're a site. Reach out to them. There's LinkedIn, right? There's clinicaltrials.gov. There's tools to figure out who these people are. There's articles. There's blogs about biotechs that get funding. that secure funding, which is a hint that they're about to do a clinical trial. The smaller the better in this case. That's another roadmap. So hopefully you get some value out of this, and hopefully you can apply some of this to your personal and business development in 2019. Even if you just pick one of these strategies, and I don't know which one you're in. I don't know what you want to do. Sometimes I don't even know what I want to do. You've got to figure that out. But once you figure that out, you've got to put in the work. And that means getting outside of your comfort zone. And that means thinking outside the box. And that means doing a lot of extra work for no money. All stuff that doesn't sound fun. All stuff that obviously make no good business sense to do in the short term, but in the long term make all the business sense in the world to do. Whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur, it makes all the sense in the world long term. The reason why most people don't get there is because they're afraid of that short term uncomfort or discomfort, and they're afraid of that short term work that it's going to take. That's it. Or they get too busy with their job descriptions and they forget about their ambitions, or they put it off until 2020. Nothing wrong with that either, right? But this is how to do it. And hopefully you guys can do something this year, if that's something that you want to do, as far as growing your skill set and your opportunities and your knowledge base. And drop me a line if you do, right? Or drop me a line if you have a particular ambition this year, but I haven't covered it, and you're trying to figure out what you can do to improve your chances of accomplishing that, right? Thank you, everybody. My voice is starting to go away again. I got to rest it. Hopefully we'll do another podcast tomorrow. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.